Today's lesson, we're going to talk about forming your company. Uh, you know, at different times in my life, I've had different opinions on this. I'm going to give you what my opinion is now. So, a lot of people come to me and go, Tai, what's the first step of starting a business? Should I just get started? Should I go to lawyers? Should I get the paperwork done? And my advice used to be just get started, and I still somewhat believe that. But what I've learned over years of doing this and working with a lot of people is that it's good to have something physical, some objective landmark that you've crossed to help you not procrastinate. So I think I recommend now at the beginning of this social media marketing agency that you think about opening your company legally. Now, the advice I'm going to give you is not, I'm not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice. In fact, I'm going to show you how you can get other people to give you that legal advice if you need it. And it's primarily for the United States, but this general principle applies. If you're in Norway, they have what's called AB companies. If it's Sweden, it's AS. If it's the United Kingdom, you have things like LTD, Limited, in Canada, and all these different, depending on what country you're in. And so this video is more for people in the U.S. because I know the U.S. law a little better, but you can apply this to wherever you live pretty much. So there's basically 3 steps, okay? 1, you need to come up with a name. Number 2, you need to come up with the legal structure of a company. And number 3, you need to have a website. Those are the 3 core elements of you starting your social media agency, okay? I've recorded another video, some other stuff on how to come up with a name, so I'm not going to talk about that. How to pick the domain name, it's primarily around the name, but I'll have another lesson on that, like how I buy domain names and some little bit of strategy there. But this one I want to talk about step number 2, which is that actually forming legally a company. Now, this used to be really expensive and a pain in the butt to do, because years ago you would have to go to a lawyer. Lawyers are a little bit sometimes like auto mechanics. They try to charge you the maximum amount of money they can by dragging out the process and all that. So for you, I don't want you to have to spend an arm and a leg to form your company. Now, there's some websites out there now, LegalZoom. There's one, I think it's called incorporate.com or something like that. I think Rocket Lawyer. There's a few different ones. I'm not affiliated with any of them. I don't make any money. Use whichever one you want to use. Like I said, I have no vested interest. I usually use LegalZoom, just me. So I'm going to tell you my experience. And I use my own lawyers in somewhat in combination. For you, if you're starting out, if you're kind of a new entrepreneur, usually LegalZoom is all you need at the very beginning. Now, you go to LegalZoom.com and you click on company. Now, in the United States, there's many types of companies you can form. All right. If you see like a company with INC at the back, that's Inc. So that's usually what's called a C corporation, C. And then there's something called an S corporation, which is like a sub chapter of C. So it's usually smaller companies will be S. And then there's something called LLCs. LLCs are a little bit newer structures. They stand for limited liability companies, but they're very popular, and I usually use them. If you have any crazy circumstances around you, like you're trying to make $100 million with this idea, or you have complicated, you're getting divorced, or any kind of baggage to your life, you probably don't want to use LegalZoom. You should use a lawyer. But LegalZoom can help you get started, and then you can consult with a lawyer, and I'll talk about that in a second. So you go to LegalZoom's website, you click on form an LLC, and then it just has a questionnaire. You just answer the questions, and they'll usually give you some guidance. Now, one of the questions they'll ask you is the name. Let's talk about the name. As I said in the other video on naming your company, the name of your LLC or your S Corp or your C Corp is not, doesn't have to be the name the public sees. Like, for example, Taco Bell and Pepsi, they're owned by a company called Yum Brands, Y-U-M Brands. Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think, too. But the public knows those companies as separate companies. So you can have the name of your agency be different than your LLC. So you could have, let's say your last name is Smith or something. It could be like Smith Holdings, Smith Ventures. And you just type that in on the LegalZoom website. One of the things they're going to do for you is check if the name is already in use. So here's my advice on that. Have your LLC be a 3-word or 4-word name. The more words you have, the less likely someone else in that state has it. So, number one, don't worry. The name you choose for your LLC, I think in general, picking a kind of generic name, it doesn't have to say social media agency in it, is fine. Your website name, the name on the business card, can be a name that's catchy around social media marketing. Okay, but the name of your company structure, which will hold your assets, which you'll open your bank accounts in, and so on, can just be kind of a generic name. So it can be your initials. If your name is Bob Smith, I wouldn't use the actual your full name, but you could use the initials. Like if your name is Bob Joseph Smith, you could be like BJS Holdings or Ventures. You can use Holdings, Ventures is good. Those are kind of good generic ones. And then it'll get LLC or Inc. at the end. So you go to LegalZoom.com or Rocket Lawyer or any of these other incorporate.com, and they're going to ask you a questionnaire. So they're going to ask you for that name. So think about that name that you want, but don't worry too much about it because usually the public won't see it. And you can always change it later. It's a pain in the butt to change, but you can. All right, the next thing is what state. If you're in the United States, you have to pick a specific state. Now, here's a little ninja tip for you. It does not have to be the state that you live in. So I have LLCs in many states in the U.S. And I'll give you some of the most popular ones right now. Well, Delaware is probably the most famous place to open your LLC. So LegalZoom, you can select Delaware. Usually, you can talk to a lawyer. Usually, you're not going to go wrong with Delaware. There's a lot of good laws around protections for you in the state of Delaware. And also, the fees aren't too high. LegalZoom will act as your registered agent. You'll need to have a mailbox and so on. LegalZoom can do that for you for a fee. I recommend you use them or somebody else as the legal agent, as the registered agent. And so you form an LLC. I would recommend, if you're not sure what to do, usually LLC is the best one to do. So what I'll do, I usually would do LLCs. I have had C corps in this and all that kind of stuff. I haven't done as much C corps, but S and so if I form the LLC, I put the name in. I usually pick Delaware. Sometimes Nevada is becoming one that's a little more popular. It doesn't have certain fees. There's some advantages to the state of Nevada. It doesn't have any state income tax. Florida I've done before. I think some people like Montana, California. But like I said, Delaware, Nevada, if you're not sure, those are pretty safe ones. There's times when you won't want to do them. Like I said, if you have anything complicated, if you have a ton of questions, we'll get to this in a second, how to use a lawyer. So you go to LegalZoom, put in the name that you want of the corporation, you pick the state. Then the next thing, they're going to ask you some things like, if it's an LLC, they're going to ask you if it's member managed or manager managed. You can usually just say it's member managed. It doesn't, if it's just you alone, if you don't have business partners, it's not quite as important, member managed or manager managed. If there's a few of you, then the difference between a member managed and a manager managed, basically, do you want to designate one of you to be kind of the boss person? That's an oversimplification, but that's beyond what we need in this video. We're going to start out real simple. If anything's complicated, you need to bring a lawyer in, right? Because it's so different for your age and location and your personal situation, financial situation. But I'm just giving you kind of the default. So right now during this 4 months, by the end of the 4 months, you've got your corporation form, you got your website, you got your name, you're acquiring clients that are paying you $1,000 to $10,000 a month. So one of the things that I think, like I said, is important is just get this done. It's not that expensive. LegalZoom can do it for you for a couple $100s. They have different levels. They're like slow. There's a slower one that's like I think it's $250 plus the state incorporation fees. Now, if you're completely cash strapped, you spent you have no extra money right now. You don't have to do this. If you do have the money, don't be cheap. Do this. It will help you mentally to know you have your corporation form. When you feel like procrastinating, not getting out of bed, you can look at the momentum you've already created, and that momentum will help you keep going. I'm a big believer in creating momentum because you're going to want to give up at some point. And by having an actual company there that you can say, I've got this. It's like a physical thing that you have. You'll get a box from these companies like LegalZoom where it'll be your articles of incorporation and all that. Put that in your library. It looks cool. They'll give you a nice little binder. Put it there. That shows you are a legitimate business. By the way, the reason you want to have a business eventually, you might start without forming an LLC or S Corp or C Corp, but in the United States, people can sue you. And by having a corporation, it's like a barrier between you. They could still theoretically sue you. It's called piercing the veil. If you've done something bad enough, something criminal, they can sue you personally and go after your personal bank account, after your personal salary, after your personal car and assets. But assuming you're not going to do something criminal, by you spending a little bit of money and forming a company, LLC or S Corp, it's a barrier between you. Usually they can only sue that company, not you personally. So depending on what happens, worst case scenario, it can be a lifesaver to have an LLC or S Corp or C Corp there. Now, when do you want to use a C Corp? C Corps are good if you are thinking of eventually going public or selling to. So usually C Corps is much more sophisticated. The taxation, it has double taxation and so on. S Corps and LLCs, if you set them up right, they usually just pass through. They're much easier to do your taxes. So that's why I said usually you're going to do S Corps and LLCs in the state of Delaware, Nevada. Those are two pretty good states. You don't have to live in Delaware or Nevada either, just to be clear. You can, in the way the law is set up in the U.S., you can set them up from anywhere in the U.S. And even if you're not an American citizen, you can work with a lawyer and open up a U.S. Company. In fact, if you're going to do business in the U.S., I recommend you usually do that. So, question for you. Question for myself that I have for you is, when should you bring in a lawyer? This is a question I've asked myself many times and had many people ask me. Well, as I said, if you feel intimidated, scared, use a lawyer, and I'll show you how to get a lawyer for cheaper. One, you can offer them exchange of service. You'll do some website stuff for them. You'll optimize their marketing in exchange for them doing the service. And you can do that. Or you can just go to them and say, can I pay you by the hour? If you live in a small town, a lot of lawyers are $150 an hour. So you could just pay them for 1 hour of time. Say, I'm on a budget, I'm young, I'm starting out, can I pay your hourly rate, and just sit down with you, and you can get some guidance, and a good lawyer can help you in an hour or two. So you can try to do this on a budget. Some lawyers will say no, some want a minimum retainer of 10 hours and all that stuff. But there's plenty of lawyers out there that can help you in an hour or two. Again, if you have a really complicated situation, it might cost you, you might need to actually retain a lawyer on an ongoing basis. Now, with my businesses are a little more complicated. I got multiple ones. I got to pay the big bucks. Some of these lawyers I have are like $900 an hour. But don't start with that. It's pain in the butt. You don't want to use them if you don't have, until you have to. So when you're on LegalZoom's website, when you're on these different, Incorporate or Rocket Lawyer, you can get started. If you mess it up, don't worry, because the beauty is they can actually close down. I mean, you can actually close down an LLC or make changes. So LegalZoom and these companies are going to make sure you don't do anything majorly wrong. They're going to check for conflicts in the name and things like that. Make sure that you can do it. Remember what I said about using a 3-word name. 3-word plus holdings. So, I mean, 3 words with the word holdings or ventures or something like that. So it could be, say your initials are RBJ. It can be like RBJ Internet Ventures. Odds are that's not taken. Okay? 1 word RBJ, Internet, 2 words, Ventures, 3, or RBJ Internet Holdings or Marketing Services. Let me take that back. Don't use marketing services. That can be in your name that you have for the public to see, but your corporate name, I think, and there's some people who disagree with me, but I think in general, just having a general holding company. Here's why. You can also use that LLC later for other things that you might do. You could use it for real estate. If you decide, you might sell the social media agency. And by having a more generic name, you're going to be able to use that and recycle that LLC. Okay? So, it's a lot of stuff I threw at you, but very important. Get some momentum here. Again, if you're on an absolute budget, you can skip this step and just do it a little bit later. But if you can, do it right here at the beginning. It'll help you feel good, feel you have some momentum. So, comment below. What is the name that you came up with for your LLC or S Corp? Remember, no one's going to steal it. You're not coming up with a fancy name, so it's okay to write it below. Okay, it's not. You don't have to put your domain name, but you can put your domain name after you buy it. No one can take it from you. So below, what's the name you're going to do for your LLC? Okay, and also include what state you're thinking of and whether you need a lawyer. Okay, so you can just kind of put, no, I think my situation is not too complicated. Write that below. This is your homework. Got to complete this to get certified. I'm not going to certify you unless I know you understand each of these principles. I'm holding you and myself to a high standard before anybody gets certified. Okay? So thanks so much. I'll see you on the next lesson.